All right, we're going to get started. I'm going to call the September 4th DRB meeting to order. First is agenda changes.
Yes, I'd like to recommend 2 agenda changes. We have a Wind NRG's renewal request, and rather than having it in other business, I would recommend that we put it either before or after the Wind NRG hearing application. And the other recommendation for an agenda change is, should the Hannaford hearing close tonight, and hopefully if it's not too late, that you might want to have a closed deliberative session to discuss it.
Okay. All right, if board members can review the minutes of August 21st.
I didn't see anything here. Pretty short and sweet. I guess I would move to approve as written.
I didn't hear anything you said.
Oh, sorry. I said I would move to approve as written.
I'll second that.
Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
I'll abstain, I was absent.
And abstain.
It's basically 4.
All right, up next is NRG Partners LLC, Subdivision revision to reduce the setback to Route 116. How you doing?
Good evening. Jeff Glassberg here for the applicant, Wind NRG Partners. Our request is for a revision to the approved plat, specifically Lot 7, moving the building setback line on the west side of the property, so parallel to 116, moving that from a 100-foot setback, as was a vestige from when Jan, the applicant, bought the property, to a 50-foot setback as indicated on this proposed plat that's up on the screen. In working with planning and zoning staff, we reviewed the history of this lot, and the 100-foot building envelope setback that was part of the original subdivision of the property did not relate to any specific town requirement. It was a choice of the then subdivider. This was a Hinsdale subdivision. So what we're seeking to do is to bring this into conformance with the 50-foot required setback. That will allow for development of this lot in accordance with the sketch plan approval, which is also on your agenda this evening. We addressed the question as to whether moving that setback to 50 feet would affect the ability to construct a roundabout at the intersection of Riggs Road and 116. And so we did the analysis based on a 137-foot setback that would be required to accommodate both the roundabout and sidewalks. And we were not able to revise this plat in advance of the hearing to reflect that setback, but we would, as a condition, understand that we would have a no-build area reflected in that radius as indicated on the plat.
Okay.
So is it a 50-foot that's from the center of 116? From the edge of the 116 right-of-way?
From the edge of the right-of-way.
Okay. So can you, well, about how far back, so my concern is that that being the building setback, the wall of a building, and my understanding is these were potentially industrial or light industrial buildings, which in my mind could be a fairly large building. The concern is if the wall's like right on the setback line, how close will that be to 116? Would it potentially obscure views coming out of NRG out of Riggs Road, and just what would it look like if it's, I don't want it to be a canyon going down 116, but I can't really visualize how far back it's going to be.
I think the way we would try to address that would be at the point of site plan approval, where we're looking at the siting of specific buildings. We are not, as part of our conceptual layout, looking at a wall of buildings along 116. So it would not be the length of the parcel in a north-south direction by any means. There may be a building at the corner, and we would have to address site distances to ensure that if there were, they would allow for appropriate site distance.
Okay, thank you.
Quick question about the sidewalk that we've been discussing in this location. Where does that fall relative to the right-of-way line, Mitch or Jeff?
There is, I believe it's indicated on this.
Is that what
That dotted line is there was an easement on the property for the sidewalk. So it's westerly of the building setback line.
Yeah.
And there's actually construction soon going to go forward in the next couple of years to put a sidewalk between Commerce Street going to Riggs Road.
Right.
And actually that came before you not too long ago. And for right now, that sidewalk is going to be along the east side of 116. The applicant is basically trying to match the existing setback that there happens to be to their existing building envelope, and not try to make, basically allow for whatever type of roundabout that would be allowed, and the sidewalk would be a part of it. So you figure that the sidewalk at some point in time, if a roundabout, and again, this is an if, because it may turn out that other types of intersection improvements may be preferred. This is all speculative at this point, but there has been some talk of a roundabout. Then whatever is placed in the sidewalk would eventually have to be modified.
Right. That's because I realized that we approved a concept of a sidewalk, and I didn't know if the sidewalk was just immediately along the right-of-way, and then we were talking about a 50-foot difference there. So, okay. My clarification then is, Mitch, you put into the some of the documentation here, and I think just a clarification then is you specified maybe elsewhere, maybe in the application, is that 137-foot distance should just be specified from the center line of 116 radius. So
Actually, it's a radius. The center of the circle would be the intersection of 116 and
the
Riggs
two
Road.
center lines.
Correct.
I think then the documentation that I see in front of me, just the draft order, might be able to be clarified further, just to reinforce.
Sure. Which one are you talking about?
I'm looking at conclusion 2. It does say the intersection of the two, but professional experience dictates put the center lines of the two roads rather than the intersection of the two roads.
Oh, okay. How about intersection of the center lines?
Sure.
So that can go into order number 3 as well. That same wording. I mean, given that this 100-foot setback didn't come from us or our regulations, and there's no history of our discussion of there needing to be a 100-foot setback, I don't have a problem with with changing it.
Board members have any other questions?
As long as the sidewalk and the roundabout is
Still possible.
possible, then yes.
All right, I'll open it up to the public. All right, we have a draft decision.
We have a draft decision. We have 2 changes to it at this point.
I'd move to approve as we've amended.
Second.
Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. And would you like to do the, discuss the extension, the sketch plan extension?
Yes.
Simply, same situation of a lot of the other ones. The challenges of getting water in the village area, which have now been rectified. Jeff, correct me on this, you do have, I believe you do have your allocation at this point for this upcoming?
So we did make an application for and receive an allocation of water and sewer specific to the development of Lot 7 to enable the light industrial development consistent with that sketch plan approval.
Okay.
We're intending, and the reason we were here tonight with this plat revision is we're doing our homework. So we are intending to come to you with a proposal regarding Lot 7 to begin implementing portions of this sketch plan. The residential components are much more water and sewer intensive. Therefore, we haven't proceeded with a request for allocation for that as of yet. We'd like to keep the sketch plan in force if we may. It provides value in terms of our planning for implementation of that residential component eventually.
When was this approved, and how many extensions have we had so far?
October of 2015, every 6 months, so I assume we've had 4 or 5.
Because we
This would be the
can't
fifth.
keep,
Right.
you know,
Sounds like
extending
there's been
an
progress
infinity, yeah.
in the meantime.
That's,
and
we're
seeing
asking for progress and due diligence.
So are there water resources on your property that could help the town with future wellness?
Not that we're aware.
Does that mean nobody's looked or it's not promising?
It means nobody's looked.
You might think about that. Some other partners in the area have invested some money in trying to help the town out. So
So how long of an extension are we looking for?
Just to recommend another 6 month.
Well, I'll make a motion to approve a 6-month extension for NRG Partners LLC.
I'll second that.
Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm okay. I just think some people have shown more initiative than you. This is a big residential proposal you have. If you want to get it off the table, maybe you ought to think about imagining ways to help it happen sooner rather than later, because later it may never happen, at least in the way you envisioned it. So that's a yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
All right, up next is Theresa Giroux Revocable Trust, final plat subdivision review for a proposed 7-unit planned unit development. Looks like you've really done your homework.
Thank you. I noticed that the town highway driveway permit was still not fully accepted. Is that correct? What's the status of that?
I believe that they have met with the road foreman, and it just is in the works with the select board, correct? That's
Could
what
you
it-
keep your
yes.
voice up, please?
It has been, we've met with the foreman, road foreman, and that is currently under review, I believe.
Yes.
So no major issues, sight distance issues coming down that hill?
No.
That's an existing access, right?
There is, to accommodate for the stormwater pond and access, and also the hedgerow on the left side or the westerly side of the driveway, it was necessary to move that access. You can see, basically, the existing access is here, the new access is there. And it has been, like I said, it was reviewed by Mike Anthony and has been verbally approved.
So you've adjusted the building envelopes?
That was what I was going to go over. So basically, the first, as part of the preliminary hearing, I don't know if we can zoom in a little bit.
Well, I was also thinking, do you want to use this plan or do you want to use
I'll probably, the site plan may be a little less busy.
Let's try.
Yeah. Perfect. So as we discussed last time, this portion of the building envelope was reduced. Also, this back, we did, that was a more larger building envelope the last time. We did bring that closer to the back of the house. We did reduce the acreage of each of the building envelopes at the request of the board. Basically, the building envelopes that we have proposed now in the final plat really are at a minimum of what we can do in terms of a building envelope with the site. We feel pretty comfortable with that. You can also switch over, Mitch, to the proposed conditions plan. There you go.
Would you like me to zoom in any part? Or?
If you can, maybe in a little bit. Try that. There you go. So the issue before, or the concerns before, were the grading on the back side of the duplex dwelling, and also the grading up in the upper corner here. We did take as much off of that building envelope as we could without trying to get too close to the upper corner of that structure. Other than those two minor changes, I think that was all that were the concerns during preliminary hearing.
Actually, there were two other things. One thing that you need to submit for this application, and one other thing was the green space number, and you provided that and shown where that happens to be. And it's 34%, and seems like a legitimate 34%. It's required to be 25%. And the other thing is you did submit the declarations.
The
that were
covenants, correct.
Correct.
Those are in there as well. Those should have been part of the packet. And we'd be happy, we'll check on the status of the access permit as well.
Okay.
I think we just haven't heard back from Mike.
So we have a draft decision. Do the board members have any other questions?
So I was wondering about what the status is of the building and garden that's encroaching into the property. From what I read, all there was a statement like, "We will talk to the landowner."
We've done that. As soon as we're ready to establish.
Keep your voice up, please.
I said as
I
soon
have
as,
trouble hearing you, and I'm sure people back there can't hear you at all.
as soon as we get, a little bit more validity, it's just a matter of moving a container. So that'll be worked out.
Okay, so the intent is that
Yes.
he will move things off. There's not going to be any right-of-way or anything like that? Okay.
No easements.
No easements, that's a better word.
It's interesting in the I guess, the property declaration about how the owner of the lot or that existing house has no obligation to the shared access road to the south, the gravel road, except that if they cause, what does it say? Just say they cause damage, they need to repair it promptly. is there a good rationale to exclude that house versus just a prorated proportion of an annual expense to maintain it?
Other than
You
they
can't
already-
make them join it.
other than they already had an access before this development was proposed.
Okay.
The attorney didn't feel it was necessary to
Burden them with the
have-
maintenance of it.
because technically they have an access.
Okay.
We're just gonna have to move it.
There was some question about liquid fuels, that we had heard earlier that there would be no liquid fuels, it was going to be natural gas, and, because the concerns over the well water and all that, and then
Correct.
that there would be no liquid fuels, and then it sounded like there's a statement somewhere that says there could be liquid fuels.
There will
Propane
be, obviously, vehicles, fuels with the vehicle. There'll be lawnmower, small quantity fuel containers, but no, if you could look at the site plan here, we've actually have it where there are gas, the design has been done as part of the utilities and the stormwater design with the natural gas. So that is the intent. It is designed to be served by natural gas, no large
So
quantity.
Mitch can help me, but I thought there was actually some verbiage that made it allowable to not use the natural gas, but to use
was-
propane or fuel oil.
It seemed in the declarations, it did kind of leave that matter open as an option. And I think we were trying to be very clear as far as, what you mentioned, yes, typical homeowner use, small scale. I think the real key here, and again, this has to do with the concerns from Orchard Commons.
Orchard Commons, yep.
The concern was that you weren't going to have homes heated with the fuel oil or propane or those particular things. And there is we did address this in the draft decision.
Yep.
And I basically, that's taking one from the other. That was just something that was picked up as far as the declarations.
And we did, if you recall, we did have an email from Water Supply Division with regards to get their view on it as well. Because we are outside of the source protection area zone, the primary concern that they had were leach fields. And this is served by town sewer. So that was the real big concern with Water Supply Division in terms of potential sources of contamination.
Are you okay, though, with the conditions that have been put in on the draft decision regarding the limitation of fuel oils as for heating?
Yeah. Yes.
You're okay? Yep.
Is that a yes?
That's a yes.
I think it's a well-written decision.
Ted, I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
I think it's a well-written decision. I'm fine with it. I would move to approve as written.
Well, I gotta open it up to the public first.
Sorry.
So I'll open it up to the public. Anybody here for? All right. Go ahead with your motion, Ted.
I move to approve as written.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ted.
Yeah, all right.
I guess you could make a
Just FYI, they probably have a second road name. Ernest Way is one, and probably a second road name at some point.
Okay.
All right, up next is Martin Foods of South Burlington. This is hearing continued from 8/7.
And Dennis, I mentioned before it all starts, I just wanted to just mention something as far as the Hannaford. Basically, regarding the drop, can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Okay, okay. Basically, regarding the stuff that we try to put in the Dropbox, we try to add, basically put everything regardless of, how it might be looked upon into the Dropbox. We want to make sure that all of the information that is submitted is available to not only the board, the organized opposition as well as the public. Just want to mention, though, there were two things that were submitted. I just want people to understand that there was one submittal that had a little bit of bias to it that the board, or I should say, can't really judge something in a particular way. And the other thing that had come up was a concern about Sarah Murphy's participation on the board. And I think that this matter was resolved in the first hearing.
It was.
And
I asked expressly the applicant the question.
exactly. And just let you know that there was this submittal, and I don't believe, and unless somebody disagrees, I mean, David, you made the statement, you were fine with it. I think Sarah has been as tough on the opposition as well as the applicant, as well as, like all the rest of us, we're trying to all do as much of a fair job as we possibly can. I'm just letting you know that this was there, and it's really not something that we believe needs to be followed up or anything more stated, unless somebody has any comments or concerns on that. All right, Dennis?
All right, thank you. So I'm sorry I wasn't here on August 7th, but I did watch the VCAM, so I'm up to speed. So if the applicant can come up to the,
And I'll second that.
okay?
I was not I was absent, but watched the video and partially participated.
I did too. So I think first, we'll start with the stormwater, or is that?
Well, if I may, just, wow, that's loud.
That's louder than ours.
You have the floor.
For the record, David White, representing Hannaford, and I do want to say that Tyler Sterling of Hannaford, who you know has been at every single hearing, is not here tonight for the same reason, John, that you've got your phone on. His wife is expecting any day and could not be 4 or 5 hours away from home tonight, but he wanted me to pass on his apologies for not being here. It was important for him to stay close to home.
Right.
So we have, if I may, we have submitted additional information that was requested in response to various questions that were raised relative to traffic, relative to stormwater. We think those materials speak for themselves. We have not prepared any presentation tonight. I have both our civil engineer, who has been the primary person addressing stormwater, and our traffic engineer here tonight. We are happy to respond to questions, but we have, again, I think the materials, rather than regurgitate what's already available in writing, we are simply prepared to respond to questions. So we'll handle that any way you would prefer.
Well, I have a couple of questions. One is, I'd like some explanation about why you guys weren't here last time. I understand you wanted time to address Jonathan's traffic input, and I felt that was entirely appropriate. But there were stormwater issues that were addressed at the last meeting that I thought you folks were perfectly well prepared to deal with or address. And we had many townspeople who were here and board members who were here, and I felt we should have been dealing with that rather than having you folks just leave your seats empty. So I was very disappointed, and I'd like an explanation as to why you made that decision not to attend at all. And then second, I think I would like to hear something from your traffic engineer with respect to how things stand. Jonathan made comments. I think it would be helpful if we had some oral response from you folks addressing those issues or anything else that's still out there.
Well, with reference to your first question, we certainly did not intend to offend anybody. We've worked very hard, I think, during this entire process to be responsive and responsible in the way we've handled things. And if people are put out by that, I do apologize. But it was a decision that was made at that time, and perhaps, you know, not the most welcome decision, but I really have nothing more to say about that question. Relative to traffic, we did not prepare a presentation. If there's a specific question about the traffic, I think that the traffic study itself, we did do what was requested, which was to, and it was a heck of a rush job to put it all together, but put together a comprehensive new traffic impact assessment. And it has the mitigation from before. We have accepted the mitigation that was VTrans and the town had asked for relative to post-construction monitoring. So we've amended our original proposals in terms of mitigation to that respect, but I think that the upshot of the analysis is that the road network can, with the mitigation proposed, can accommodate this project.
Well, David, let me just get really to the tipping point for me.
Sure.
Traffic-wise, I think we are at a point in Hinesburg where we are at a tipping point. And this project is undoubtedly going to increase traffic pressure on the center of town at essential times. We've reviewed your studies, and we understand what they say, and they're probably consistent with acceptable models. But if we don't build this project, traffic is probably not going to get worse significantly in a way in the immediate future. But if we do build the project and we're wrong, there's no going back from my perspective as a townsperson. I don't want to make a decision that is going to change Hinesburg irreversibly in a way that this town has never experienced. And it's important for me to understand what the best projections are, or why we should not credit the more dire projections that can't be changed if we accept your models. Sometimes we're dealing with traffic issues, and if things don't work out as visualized, there's a going back place. You can take 1, 2, or 3 steps back. I don't think we're in that situation with Hannaford, and we as townspeople have to decide how much of our future we want to bet on this one project.
Well, I certainly understand your concern, and the traffic has been one of the things that's been discussed at length during now, 8 or 9 years. And, our perspective, which we have reiterated time again, and the opponents feel differently about it, our perspective is that the traffic analysis as done is conservative, that we have used trip generation rates that are in fact higher than what we think will actually occur. We've built in that sensitivity analysis, if you will. And that we expect the performance of the network to be superior to what the study actually shows. But we have chosen to do the modeling in a way, and consistently have done it this way from the beginning, that we believe is conservative. The opponents obviously have a different perspective on that matter. And I think it falls to you to make that choice. We've provided the information. They've provided their perspective on that. And, I think you have to make that decision.
We will. Okay. Thank you.
If there's specific questions around traffic, we're happy to address them.
So I have a question. When I was
Sure.
reading this report, I believe that the 185-foot queue from Commerce Street that is going to go, the left turn queue.
The southbound left turn on 116.
Southbound left
Yes.
turn. The way the acceptability appears to be on the 30th, the lowest day of traffic. I'm not understanding how that what happens to those first 29 days when it's maybe not acceptable.
Well, it's actually the 30th highest day.
30th highest.
30th highest, not lowest, highest.
That's what I was trying to articulate.
You have with you an experienced traffic engineer right to your immediate right. But the gist is that as a matter of policy, standard methodology looks at the 30th highest hour, because and accepts that there'll be a certain amount of congestion. There'll be 29 hours a year that'll have more congestion than that. And that's true, nationally in terms of what the standards are when these analyses are done, because to build the infrastructure to a point where you can accommodate absolutely the peak means that most of the year it's vastly overbuilt. So it's more expensive to build, it's more expensive to maintain, you've got wider roads, they have impacts on village centers and so forth and so on. So I don't have an opinion one way or another as to whether or not that's the correct policy, but that is standard traffic analysis policy, that you don't try to design or analyze for the absolute peak, that you rather look at the 30th highest hour.
And the 95th percentile, not the 100%.
Correct.
Okay. Can you talk about the intersections that are going to see degraded level of service from present level of service?
I think for that's a very specific question. I will ask Roger to address that. Why don't you come on up? So the question, as I understand it, is to address any intersections where we anticipate after the development the level of service actually deteriorating. Is that correct?
Yes.
And to simply discuss those.
Okay. I think none of them failed. None of them got an F, but I think some went down.
Those would include at Commerce Street, with the development, the level of service stays at C. However, with the diverting of Mechanicsville Road left turns to Commerce Street, that drops the level of service at Commerce Street to a D. And we have proposed changes in the signal timing to basically achieve that level of service D. So that's one location. And the only other location, I believe, is the Silver Street intersection, which during the year 2024 build, the left-turning traffic exiting Silver Street will experience level of service E instead of level of service D.
You said from which to which? From D, from C to D?
From
D to E?
From D to E.
Okay.
At Silver Street.
Left turn going north.
Could you explain D and E? I have no clue. Is that better or worse?
It's just like grades in school. The farther they go down. Yeah. And I believe that you reached some conclusions that part of the queuing is due to Mechanicsville Road left turning, people permitting cars to make left turns out of Mechanicsville Road?
Yes, what we observed, and this is a few years back now, but what we observed was a very common during the peak hour, people being courteous southbound through vehicles on Route 116. Basically, we're proceeding to allow cars to exit the left turn exit from Mechanicsville Road southbound onto 116. And that's something that definitely modifies the queuing. It tends to make for longer queues on Route 116.
So by making no left turn at Mechanicsville Road and putting them onto Commerce Street, ostensibly, you avoid that, but you queue up Commerce Street more, right?
Yes, that's actually reflected in the state's VTrans's outline of various options for Mechanicsville Road, where they opined that diverting left turns from Mechanicsville Road would actually reduce conflicts and create more efficient traffic flow southbound on 116.
And I think you're saying, if I heard you correctly, that by changing the interval of the lights at Commerce Street and 116, you might ameliorate or lessen the impact of the queuing, additional queuing off Commerce Street. Is that right?
Yes.
But my experience is whether the light signal is 10 seconds or 30 seconds, there's just a limited amount of space south of Commerce Street that left-turning cars can turn in. So whether it's 10 seconds or 30 seconds, you still can only get 3 or 4 or 5 cars turning left. So I'm not sure that really changing the timing of the signal really accomplishes anything in real life.
Remember that we're also changing the signal at Charlotte Road, which is really the chief bottleneck.
Okay, well, you didn't talk about that in this vein, so.
I mean, that's the root cause presently of the queuing. I'm sorry.
So you're trying to make the north-southbound travel lane longer, have a longer light than at present, so it gives more opportunity for clearing?
Yes, the cycle length and the green times will increase on both 116 and on Commerce Street as well.
I have a couple of questions. It wasn't until last meeting that I realized at Charlotte Road that I guess you're talking about removing the protected left turn. It was my understanding that you were just proposing that you didn't have separate left turns, that they'd be simultaneous, but it would still be a protected turn. If that seems to me to not be a little dangerous. Coming out of Lampman's and turning left from Charlotte Road going north. That should be a protected left turn. It can be simultaneous, I think, because of the layout of the intersection. Seems like it would work, but it seems like it should still be protected. If it's not a protected turn, does that blow all of that analysis out of the water?
No, not at all. I mean, we mapped out what the turning paths would be for left turns turning out of Lampman's and left turns turning from Charlotte Road. And there were no conflicts. I mean, they were very comfortably, there was sufficient space for those left turns to occur simultaneously and without conflicting.
But Dick, there's still a conflict from exiting Lampman's, traveling onto Charlotte Road with a left turner from Charlotte Road. That's what you're curious about, correct?
Yeah. So there's going to be somebody going straight through, and if it's not protected, then you potentially have a conflict with that person coming straight out of Lampman's.
Yes.
I guess the other direction is not possible. You can't go straight from Charlotte Road into Lampman's. Well, at least you shouldn't.
Worse things have happened there.
But the other direction, there is a potential, and I see now that it's, I guess it's somewhat reduced because it is just that one direction. I did have another question. I was trying to, I don't even know which document it is. It's a memorandum on your traffic. Page 2, number 6 was, the question was clarify how long the Commerce Street turn lanes will be and how much Commerce Street will need to be widened. The next couple paragraphs, I couldn't really follow. It kind of sounded like you were saying that the post 224 build, that queue would go from 278 to 519 feet. And then the last sentence is the corresponding lengths of the westbound right turn lane equals 27 feet and 29 feet. if the queuing actually goes out to 519 feet, what does the 27 and 29 feet mean? Could you just explain that whole intersection?
Right turn movement has obviously a greater opportunity to actually make that turn. They can turn right on red. They can turn, basically it's called an overlap with the left turns coming into Commerce Street and into Farmall Drive. So that they have greater time available to them to turn right than does the left turn movement. Secondly, it's also the volume is much lower, at least half, if not a third, once we add Mechanicsville left turns. So basically, there will be sufficient time in each cycle for right-turning vehicles to, as the left turn phase or the left turn movement proceeds, right-turning vehicles will be able to get in their right turn lane. And
so that's if there's enough room in the left turn lane to hold the cars that are trying to turn left.
Right.
So they're not blocking the right turn cars.
there will be some blockage, but there will be, each cycle, there will be an opportunity for right-turning vehicles to stack in their lane, in their dedicated lane.
Okay, and I guess the other thing I understood was that your proposal is that the only lanes that need to be striped are just the gas station, the mobile station. I think when we heard last week, it sounded like queues could be, you know, all the way back to like Tailhook, maybe even to the Hannaford driveway itself. I have no idea how many feet that is, too many numbers. But so are you saying that you don't, your analysis would indicate that the queues would not get that long, that you?
No, they will get that long.
Okay.
The proposal really focuses for the do not block intersection markings and signage, really focuses on the high volume driveways that are closest to 116. The remaining driveways are not high volume driveways, and the amount of time that the queues would actually block those driveways would be significantly less. Currently, we're only proposing to mark and sign the first two driveways that are shown on the screen.
I would say that the vet clinic does a fair amount of evening business. Oh, sorry. That the vet clinic does a lot of evening, afternoon business. I agree most of the businesses during the high peak hours may not have as much traffic, but that one could be harder for people if they're trying to travel south. They could have trouble getting across the queue to get over.
So, thank you, Roger, for preparing more or less the updated traffic impact study that I think we were looking for. It became clear after the number of submittals that we needed something comprehensive that now we're looking at. As I'm reading the traffic impact assessment now, it appears that Hannafords have more or less decided that the closure of the Mechanicsville left is the preferred option. Is that correct?
We took that from the town.
Why don't I address that if I may? We basically said to VTrans and to the town staff that, you know, we're looking for guidance. Mm-hmm. What do you want? And it is that VTrans came back, and my understanding is the town working with the select board, and this is, I've been not directly in communication with select board, but just with town staff, is that was the preferred option, and we are perfectly happy to do that option. It was one of the ones we thought might work better anyway, so we simply reached a consensus, if you will, among at least those three parties.
I will ask Alex and Mitch if that's the case. Personally, and to the board here, I don't agree with that. I'm of the opinion of the wait and see approach, frankly, and engineers and police can make that judgment call. There's been minimal crashes. We're going to see queuing maintained more or less near or through that intersection, and so more or less the status quo will remain. And I think the impact of forcing everyone down Commerce is not worth it in the near term. And I would request that basically we escrow the 25K that was stipulated as to the mitigation at that intersection. So unless, Alex, you tell me that there's been a decision on that intersection.
Yeah, so it's complicated because you're not the only decision makers that are hearing this case. The Act 250 review, which is a state level permitting, was remanded back to the lower court from the Vermont Supreme Court. And this was one of the issues that the select board argued in front of the Supreme Court, or our attorney did, that a traffic light was not the only possible improvement and we should be looking at others, and the Supreme Court agreed. Because that Act 250 review will be heard again by the lower court, and because of the nature of the lower court and the Supreme Court's decisions, it's our feeling that, and I can't speak for the select board or VTrans, but I've been in those conversations, and the feeling is that something needs to be proposed. That the lower court landed on the need for a traffic signal because that was the only mitigation proposed, and some of the parties feel like it's unlikely that the lower court judge is going to accept a do nothing approach. So the wait and see option, which is one that Hannaford actually, I think Roger proposed as one of the acceptable options, is certainly in the mix. But when the select board reviewed all those available options with advice from our council, they felt that option 8 was probably the best way to move forward. Ultimately, that lower court is going to render a decision on that, and who knows, it may get appealed back up to the Supreme Court again. Your decision is not contingent upon that other process that's happening in parallel. Okay. So you can decide differently, but I think it's important to understand where the various parties are, and the applicant is correct in saying that the select board and VTrans are supporting that option 8 at this point for a variety of reasons, some of which I tried to.
That is news to me. Clearly, the VTrans memo that we had a while back was actually recommending the wait and see approach, as I recall.
Yeah,
so and since then conversations have occurred.
We had hoped, I had received some information from the town council that maybe VTrans might provide some testimony for your process. They haven't to date. But the town and VTrans have been in communication since the Supreme Court ruling, and that I think the applicant is accurately, portraying the options that those two parties are most interested in at this point.
So it's a related issue, but I will also state that I'm not a fan of the widened Commerce Street for the length that's been discussed, and I've mentioned that a few times, and the applicant nor opponents have provided technical judgment to that effect, but seeing that most of the right-hand turners appear to be Hannaford-related traffic, and this goes toward the bigger point of Greg has identified that we're in a situation of congestion that's not going to be relieved as per the mitigation. They are going to mitigate largely their effects, but we're going to be stuck with a congested network for the years to come, I think, regardless of this particular development. And so the onus then becomes on what other improvements are possible, and that becomes safety and mobility for others that decide not to drive during that peak period. Because there's little capacity that we can bring or relief to the people who happen to be stuck in their vehicles during that peak hour. And it seems obvious to me that we're going to introduce some conflicts for the benefit of a small amount of delay reduction for those few right-hand turners on Commerce Street. So that's something that we can deliberate among the board. I'm stating that for the applicant and others to reflect on, and I'll ask for comments in a second. As I reiterated, I'm going to duplicate some of the comments that I put in my memo last meeting, is that, again, it's disappointing that as a town, we haven't decided how we want to improve Silver Street. There's clearly a delay issue as well as a safety issue in the greater vicinity. The scoping study that was done, or excuse me, corridor study that was done in 2014 identified that there should be improvements. We haven't identified what they are. This project does deteriorate the conditions, albeit in the 2024 condition during the PM peak only. It would be nice to see some recommendation for some mitigation in the vicinity, and I'm inclined to look for the ways to improve mobility for those who are walking and cycling around our community, if we can't improve the vehicle capacity. And so that would be recommendations of those rapid crossers at some crosswalks, and the Silver Street crossing that's most proximate is near the school, and that would be an appropriate mitigation relative to the degree of impact at Silver Street. The improvements that have been identified, multimodal improvements, while the applicant has reiterated that you've been improving sidewalks and access to the site and from the site to the immediate connections, I have to say that that's kind of the par for course. And that given the degree of impact that we have and the lack of ability to mitigate by vehicle mitigations, it would be nice to see a little bit above and beyond. And that's what VTrans, what I read from the level of service policy intention is to say, how can we improve safety and mobility? And that would be, I think, the rapid flasher on the crossing at Mechanicsville, where the canal crosses Mechanicsville. There's a number of demands, and I think that's only going to increase with the store there. It would be nice to have that crossing improved safety-wise. And then it's just an acknowledgement that recently the C6 that's referenced is still missing, and it would be very nice to see that at some point. I know it's on a VTrans controlled roadway, 116, and I trust that obviously before any construction they would have to approve that taper and the turn length, but it would be appropriate for us to see some drawing. We're on 116 and this intersection. The last comment is that we've been discussing, there's a sidewalk at the gas station, and we were just discussing another sidewalk that's going to continue north along to Riggs Road. Why, if we're maintaining an exclusive pedestrian phase, why don't we put a crosswalk that crosses Commerce Street? That would be an appropriate active mode mitigation there.
Where? Crosses where?
Isn't there? There's no striping proposed right here on Commerce Street, and that should be shown.
No.
Yeah, that's, nope, on Commerce Street itself. That should be shown and maintained, if not.
And it's interesting, because you're right, the map doesn't show
Yeah, but it's there now.
It is there now.
Yes.
The one segment that doesn't have a marked crosswalk is the 116 crossing on the north side of the intersection.
Right.
We've talked about why. Somebody asked me that once, like, why do we have pedestrian crossings on three
And frankly,
segments?
it should all be if we're going to maintain the exclusive pedestrian phase.
Yeah,
So we're talking about minimal striping. So I've gone on enough. I appreciate the comprehensiveness of the TIA. I think there's some additional room for improvements given the fact that we're in a congested situation.
If I may offer just one clarification, we do have an approved letter of intent from VTrans for the changes to the left turn lane southbound, and that letter of intent I think is still valid for another couple of months. It was for a slightly...
Mechanicsville?
No, I'm talking about southbound on 116. I think that's what John Slayson was asking about was, approval from VTrans for the changes to that southbound left turn lane. And so we do have a letter of intent from them. They've reviewed it, they've approved it. We are planning to renew that. That's coming up in the next couple of months, and there have been some slight changes to it. I think maybe it was approved at 175, it's now 185, but essentially they have reviewed it, they're aware of it, and we do have a letter of intent from them.
Want to talk about your proposed post-construction traffic study. My understanding is that the mitigation, we can't kind of leave an open-ended, it says you're going to come back with your proposals, I guess, is what I guess I read, if these certain criteria are not met. You want to talk a little bit about that? My understanding was, from a board's perspective, the mitigations have to be identified beforehand if we're going to say, if this doesn't happen, you got to do this. But leaving it open-ended is actually not obligatory on the applicant when the time comes.
Yeah, I'm not an attorney. What I can say is that the language here was actually drafted by VTrans. This was their proposal, and we incorporated it, and I assume, I don't know, maybe. And anyway, I assume they know what they're doing relative to what's allowed and what's not allowed. But this is, with the exception of the numbering of the paragraphs, because we had to insert it in the others, is, I believe, verbatim what VTrans drafted and proposed, and we accepted it.
And Ted, that's another point of sort of joint communication between the applicant, VTrans, and the town. Our attorney was involved in that conversation of that language as well. I don't think any of us know exactly whether it will pass the muster that's necessary based on what the Supreme Court's ruling was in lower court, but this is at present the best attempt to have a clear set of standards that can be, triggered if necessary after the fact. Our attorney will be happy to meet with you as a board in your deliberations, and if you as a board have additional suggestions on how to improve that, I'm sure he will be happy to entertain those.
Can I just ask one thing that kind of leads into the next portion of the meeting, but will it change stormwater at all if you widen Mechanicsville up to Dark Star?
Commerce.
Oh, yeah, excuse me, Commerce up to Dark Star. Does that affect the current stormwater plan? Anybody?
The widening that's proposed today is what's been proposed throughout, so those changes are already incorporated in all of our analysis.
Okay, because previous to this, I don't think that it was clear exactly how far the widening taper would come up, so I just wanted to verify that that was included in the original stormwater plan.
And regarding widening, there was a question raised last week about the distance from the pavement to existing street trees. I'm not sure if street trees are even shown on the map up there. I don't know what the proper distance is for a healthy street tree, but that was one concern, would be that the widening of that doesn't encroach on the existing trees and affect their health.
Big culvert before, that's why I asked about drainage. There's a pretty big culvert, and then it's the street trees.
And that culvert will have to get filled in if you're widening the...
That's why I wondered about, that's why I was, it's a
swale.
It's a swale, but it's probably, not a culvert, it's a swale, but it's probably like 25 feet wide. Like, it's a good swale
Okay.
that has some water in it when we have water.
Sarah, did your question, because you posed the question last time about how much of Commerce Street would need to be widened, did you feel like you got that answered? Because when I read the review, the updated information, I couldn't quite figure out, like this much feet of Commerce Street will be widened by this many feet.
Yeah, that was, I did get the general sense that it was to Dark Star and then a taper, but if you wanted to be more inclusive, that would be great.
Well, I think it's shown on the plan. The plan actually Mitch just had up shows that widening. It's the hatched.
So it's the portion in gray, David?
Yes, it's, let's see, which button do I push here?
Top one.
I got two different spots.
Well, it looks like it's on. Let's see, let's try that. There we go. So the widening is here on the north side, and it's that gray area and this gray area.
And your driveway is where?
It's off this plan. It's further, it's over here.
So the widening will only be on the north side of Commerce Street and only as far as the tailhook towing driveway?
Yes.
Okay, that's clear.
What map is this? Does it have a number? I can't see.
This is C2. C2.
How do I get to C2?
And so your latest traffic studies don't indicate that that needs to be any longer? So, because
No.
that's been this way for a while, right? It's been proposed the same way?
That's been since at least 2010. So the, again, if you think back just a few minutes to the discussion, the issue here is not that right turn lane, and that's what's being lengthened there. The additional queue is primarily in the left turn lane. And so the benefit of extending the right turn lane, which I heard John Slason question whether that really was appropriate, given the limited number of the relatively short queue, because you don't actually need that physical space to accommodate that right turn queue, because the queue is much shorter than the space. It simply makes it easier for people to get into it. That's really what that achieves. The left turn queue is the one that gets materially longer as a result of the diversion of Mechanicsville, and it's not using that physical space. It's using, the drive lane, basically.
But if that left turn queue gets long enough that it now blocks the right turn queue, even though there's not many cars there, they're going to queue up behind the people trying to turn left.
That's correct, and that's why we've suggested extending it so that it's easier. Now, the vast majority of the time, it'll be a complete non-issue. People will be able to get into that space. The queue's not going to be that long all the time. During absolute peak periods, there will be moments when it'll be harder for somebody to get into that right turn lane. But as Roger stated earlier, with every cycle, cars will move forward and cars will be able to then pull into that right turn lane. And given the experience here in Hinesburg, as you look at this corner right here of Mechanicsville Road, people tend to be courteous anyway, so I don't think that's going to be a major issue. But we have suggested doing the widening to just alleviate it that much more, to make it easier for people to get in.
But that's the widening that's shown here, not additional widening?
Correct.
Okay.
And how far across is the shaded area?
I don't recall off the top of my head.
270 feet, provides about 200 feet of storage.
In width?
Oh, the width of the widening? I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay, so it's not like a full lane of 20 feet or something?
Right.
Okay.
And that would accommodate the 30th most busiest hour of the year, as you were talking before?
Well, the entire system and all the analysis is based on that. And so there will be times when the queue for the left turn will extend beyond the widening that we're showing here. It will not happen often, but it will happen from time to time.
The 29 other hours?
Yeah.
Okay.
Are we ready to move on to stormwater?
Or do you want to stay on traffic and have the public make their comments now, or do you want the public to make their comments now on traffic, or do you want to go to your choice?
I think we ought to invite the public to talk about traffic, because stormwater was kind of dealt with. Nothing new has been added since last time.
Yeah.
Do you?
I'll open it up to the public. So we don't have a mic, or we do have a mic?
Peter Erb, I mentioned this last time, and a week ago I evidenced it in the middle of the day. The hash marks that stop traffic from coming out of the mobile station that are closest to 116, there was someone there who was bound and determined to make the left-hand turn even though it was blocked. and the traffic backed right up and stopped 116 for a full cycle, and this was just like 11 or 12 in the morning. Those hash marks are just simply, what they really do is just keep a space available so people can pull into it and get out of there, because otherwise it's absolutely impossible with a queue to get out of those places. And it's just a disaster waiting to happen. I don't care what the analysis says, it just simply, it doesn't work when you're trying to have people pull out of there. We talked about trying to somehow limit the mobile station to using only the entrance above where it says street. Their site plan was approved and they laid out their whole station so the traffic could go that way. I don't know if there's any way to force mobile to close that front exit to left-hand turns, but it's absolutely going to cause congestion there. There's no doubt in my mind. I've seen it 2 or 3 times.
My recollection is we reserved the ability to tell them to make that a exit only. If issues arose, exactly. Yeah, as part of the condition of mobile, we reserved the right to, if problems occurred, to make that an exit only.
An entrance only.
No, exit.
Exit. You had to enter in the further.
You had to enter the further one down.
Right. Okay.
I think it would also really be helpful to, in the right-hand turn lane on Commerce Street, to somehow say it's right turn only lane, because people also pull out into that and then want to get into the left-hand turning lane, and they use it for merging, and it just.
So I'm here for the Planning Commission, and it's to address the memo that we put in last time, so it's not traffic, so I don't want to hold it up.
Yep, traffic.
Hello, I'm George Dameron. I've lived here, I think, as you all know, as I've mentioned a couple of times, 30 years in the village, and I've watched congestion increase over, well, like John, I think John's lived here longer in the village than I have, but we've watched the congestion increase. I have followed and tried to read as many reports as I possibly could, given the fact that I also have a full-time job. I haven't been able to follow the details, but I have to say at this point, I'm just speaking for myself, I'm very agnostic that no matter what we do, if this development goes through, the congestion is going to get a lot worse. And it saddens me because when I moved here in 1988, Hinesburg, its reputation was somewhat tainted by the school strike and by the cheese factory smell. And now it's beginning to develop a reputation for having some of the worst traffic of a small town in Vermont. So I guess what I would do is plead with the DRB as much as possible to bear in mind that those of us who live in the village, to echo what has just been said before, that we need maximum walkability and safety, and everything should be done to make sure that pedestrians and residents' needs are served, and not just the marketing needs of Martin Foods, because I think what we have here is actually an attempt to pull people into the village, not just to serve people in the town of Hinesburg. And with one road, only one road that can service the entire village, we're just going to see much more congestion. So I like the idea of rapid flashers. Anything that can be done to somehow save this village, I urge you to try to integrate into your deliberations and also into your final report and in your votes. Thank you.
I'm Carol Jenkins. We live 7/10 of a mile from 116 on Silver Street. I will not ride my bicycle from my house to Lampman's because it is not safe. So I drive my car 7/10 of a mile to the grocery store. So there is no access for pedestrians or bikers that is safe, even once you get on 116. So if you're trying to think about mitigating traffic, again, think about people walking and biking, because there is nothing I see in this plan that will help people not have to use their cars to not get run over.
All right, thank you. So now we'll move to stormwater. Does anybody have any questions for the applicant on stormwater? I didn't see any hands raised, so.
No, that's fine. They should, actually, usually in this proceedings, your people have been oftentimes the first people to speak.
They spoke at the last meeting, right? Correct?
Yes, they did.
Raise your hand next time. Who's up?
We signed up. Mitchell knows we're here.
I hope we're not cutting them off. So.
No, go ahead. Who's coming up?
Okay.
At least they showed up.
So you're responding to the new,
Yes. John Bruno and Michael Oman, we prepared a memorandum dated September 4th, which you have a copy of, and I would like to just make some summary points regarding that. And in many ways, our comments
Did the applicant get this? Because I thought it just showed up today, right? Or
Yes, it was submitted today, and we did our best to pass it around to the other parties.
okay, so they've seen it.
Right.
Maybe they haven't had
Or
that time to
I
digest it, but
shouldn't
they've seen
say
it.
that. I don't know if, Dave, if you want.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
In many ways, our comments reflect substantially on the same issues of our August 2nd memorandum, and are explained in detail in the September 4th one. But we don't have any substantial issues with the background traffic or projected traffic. Our concern is with chip generation, which we've discussed in the past, and that actually they continue to use the average 10 trips per 1,000 square feet from the 8th edition of the ITE trip generation manual. Again, that's national average. This has been going on for 8 or 9 years, and Hannaford needs to confirm the chip generation rate based on similar demographic Hannaford, possibly Milton. With all the efforts that have been put into the traffic evaluation over the past years, it would not be a big effort to place traffic counters at the Milton access drives for a week to develop actual trip generation for a Hannaford with similar demographics. And I guess I don't understand why this has not been done when in effect the ITE manual says local trip generation is better than using the manual, and VTrans also recommends using local data. Although Lampman's trip generation is based on a one-day accounts, it demonstrates that there is sufficient question to develop trip generation rates from similar demographic Hannafords. All the background traffic data and projected traffic volumes are single-day counts that actually have been factored to the design hourly volume. And I want to emphasize, and I think I did earlier, is that we are looking at 1 hour, typically between 4 and 5. But if you look at the counts that were taken at Mechanicsville, I believe in February, or was it July? I can't read the last set of counts that were taken. Actually, there's a 3-hour period that have significant, even though the 4 to 5 is the highest, the 3 to 4 and the 5 to 6 are not very far off from that high hour. So we're really looking at a 3-hour period, not just a 1. The significant differences between the 821 18 TIA and previous studies, every time an analysis has been questioned, a new analysis results in significant differences, resulting in questioning, questioning the confidence of the analysis. The traffic impact analysis states that queues don't match actual traffic conditions, and the LOS analysis do not replicate actual conditions in the field. There's a footnote in the synchro analysis that was used that states 95th percentile volume exceeds capacity, queue may be longer. Queues shown is maximum after 2 cycles. You all know what the queues are like out there. I don't have to tell you, and that they last a long time. This is really just going to make it worse. And again, my major concern is that the analysis does not replicate the actual queues that are out there, which then, in my mind, questions the validity of the analysis. The TIA only recommends do not block driveways for only 2 driveways in Commerce Street, which was discussed earlier. And the response was, well, they're low volume. Well, if you've got a business there, getting blocked in or blocked out is pretty significant, with queues that end up being backed up. If in fact blockout areas are placed at the driveways that are being blocked by the queue, it'll actually extend the queue back as far as the Hannaford access, which then brings into question the analysis, the validity of the analysis of the Hannaford access drive with the queues backed up that far. So in my opinion, the driveways that are being blocked, other than the first 2, should be indicated so that business isn't interrupted to those other businesses on Commerce Street. The reason, and I indicated the queues and congestion exist for a 3-hour period, is that the roadway system is unable to accommodate the total demand volume during a 1-hour period. Everyone who travels Route 116 during the peak hour periods is aware of the long queues and congestion. Traffic safety discussions of the high crash location are in the TIA, but nothing is on the effects of the permitted left turns and the potential safety issues regarding frustrated drivers taking chances to make left turns with oncoming traffic. No discussion of how to improve safety or effects of additional traffic. There's been no analysis of what the increased crashes would be as a result of the increased traffic. Again, the applicant did not provide any plans for the 116 Commerce Street intersection or the left turn lane, southbound lane on 116 as part of this application. There have been no truck turning movements analysis using auto turn, which is required as a basis for the intersection design for both Route 116 Commerce Street and the Commerce Street Hannaford access. And if these truck turning movements aren't adequate, it's just going to cause gridlock. In conclusion, significant existing congestion and safety issues in Hannaford project will make congestion worse, and permitted left turns will adversely affect safety due to frustrated drivers taking more chances due to congestion and long queues. Due to the fact that there is very little room for errors in judgment, particularly with regards to the trip generation, that the system really is, I think has been discussed here by members of the board, that there's really no slack in the system to be able to absorb any wrong decisions. And again, it's not unrealistic, and over the 8 to 9 year period that this has been going on, not to get the actual trip generation rates from a similar facility. The LOS analysis fails to replicate the existing traffic conditions and queues. And I think Michael has a...
Well, I just wanted to add one or two things. In particular, I heard it represented earlier that we would expect traffic to be kind of better than the analysis that we see, and that analysis is presented in the report. It's been very helpful to have the worksheets associated with the work that's been done so far, because the worksheets show that we can expect the actual traffic to be worse than the analysis represents. As John indicated, several of the analyses are flagged that Synchro believes that it did not get an adequately long queue because the queue exceeded capacity in a number of instances. So Synchro itself is telling us that it doesn't know what's going on. So I think that it's really important that we get a better handle on this, because we're basically representing everything is going to happen in the village on the basis of what this analysis says, and how long these queues are going to be, and how long the things are going to be backed up, and how long the turn lanes are going to have to be. So I think that that's really kind of important. And one other thing, really kind of a minor issue, I got the sense that there was a little bit of confusion about queuing and signal phasing, and it's important to realize that the signal phasing change proposed for Commerce Street has already been implemented. That is, we've gone to the flashing yellow. So that exists already. So that hasn't, whereas any changes at Charlotte has not yet been implemented. It would have some effect, and there's been a lot of discussion of that. So, but basically, I sort of have one overriding kind of comment, and this comes from many years of kind of doing planning and traffic planning for communities. Especially, I've done a lot of small communities around the Boston area too. And what's winding up happening here is we're trying to put a regional traffic generator in the middle of a small town that already has huge traffic problems. And this lack of a good fit, I think, is causing a lot of the problems that you're facing. Every time you try to fix a problem at Mechanicsville, all of a sudden it doesn't work at Commerce Street, and we're kind of shifting it around, and we're chasing it around as best we can. But we're trying to put basically a major regional traffic generator, and we all know that Hannaford isn't basing its marketing on serving Hinesburg Village. So we're trying to put a regional traffic generator in the middle of a small village with limited traffic capacity and big traffic problems. So that's kind of what you're faced with here, just to sort of put it in perspective.
Just one other point regarding chip generation is in the TIA, it is stated that they're hoping to draw traffic from Williston and South Burlington, which again goes, in my mind, to the point that the trip generation rates that are presented in this study are too low. I think that's about it.
Thank you. Board members have any questions?
Just one comment about the turn radius at each intersection that gets looked at. So there is ample room for the larger trucks. I think that's important, that really gets scrutinized, make sure it's ample.
Thank you.
So the question of the truck turning radius was addressed in all the prior proceedings on this, and we did not do new turning diagrams this time through, but we did do them. And as a consequence of that, if you look at the proposed mitigation, there are two key things that I want to just draw your attention to. And one is that all southbound deliveries for trucks will actually come via Mechanicsville Road and Commerce Street. I'm sorry, excuse me, northbound from the south. If you're coming up, they'll take a right turn on Mechanicsville Road and a left turn onto Commerce Street to come in. So they will not be going through the intersection of 116 and Commerce Street. So that because of the turning radius issues that were raised in the last proceeding with this. The second is that if any southbound trucks on 116 will be restricted during the peak hours. And off the top of my head, and don't hold me to this, look at it, it's in writing in the TIA, but I believe it's between 3 p.m. and 6 p.m. that any deliveries of the tractor trailers will be prohibited if they're coming south. So we've addressed the turning radius questions directly with respect to the mitigating conditions that we have accepted and were part of and were approved by this board previously.
Thank you.
Would it be okay if the experts responded to that answer? Sure.
Very briefly, our only concern is that that works for Hannaford's trucks, but Hannaford's trucks aren't the only trucks accessing this location, so we still have to deal with trucks somehow. Yeah, with all the additional traffic associated.
Thank you.
I mean, just listening to that, I would have a concern as far as enforcement and how such a requirement would be enforced. It may require some type, assuming an approval and decision, it may actually require some language. I almost want to say an automatic violation if one is observed, and just a thought on that.
All right. We'll move on to stormwater.
Catherine Goldsmith. I was in the Bristol Bakery the other day, and I saw an Aubuchon truck do a 3-point turn in order to back into the loading area. So they turned into the mobile and backed across Cromber Street all the way into here to make a delivery. So of course they blocked Commerce Street for, I mean, not that long, but it was blocked and it wasn't a Hannaford truck.
So do the board members have any questions about Paul O'Leary's response to the stormwater?
I guess I did have a couple things. So at one point in the stormwater, you talked about the soils and the combination CD, FD. So if someone could help better explain that, so you from your perspective, you think they're mostly D, and so therefore you conform to the D soil requirements. The opponent thinks the other soils are in there, and it doesn't suffice to just call it D. So you tried to explain it, but if you could dumb it down for me, that'd be good.
Sure. Most of the soils on the site are D. There's a number of soils that have a dual designation, like there's some B/D, there's some C/D soils. And what that means is the second letter is the soil in its native condition. So if you have a C/D soil, that means in its native condition it's D. If you were to drain the soil, provide improvements, the classification might change to a C. So for the purposes of the stormwater, anything with a dual classification is considered to be a D-type soil. On the soil maps up on the screen, the northern portion of the property is actually mapped as C soils. So that's the soil mapping that was done quite a long time ago. If you recall, when we've done, some of the site visits out there, it seems like the northern portion of the site, as you get closest to Dark Star, is actually the wettest portion of the site. There's wetlands there. We have that drainage swale behind Dark Star that is in bad need of some maintenance that doesn't drain. And then as part of the building plan, Hannaford hired a consultant to do a number of borings in the area, and the two borings that are on the north end of the site, in where it's classified as sea soils on the map, are actually, if you look at the results of the borings, it's almost totally clay. There's 6 or 8 inches of topsoil, and it turns right into a gray clay as you go down. So we think it is possible as you go forward that the A&R would agree to us that the proper designation for all the soils on the site would be D.
So I guess I did have another question that kind of came up in the last meeting. In the much earlier meeting, I thought I had heard some discussion about the swale that was to be used by Dark Star, that there may have been some issues or between Dark Star and you, whether or not you could use that. Maybe I just misunderstood it. Maybe it was a 2017 makes the swale not usable for a water quality device. But at the time, I think somebody said, well, that's okay. We could use the pipe down the bank road to get water off the site. We don't have to go out through that swale. My understanding was your only holding pond is what feeds the swale. So water that's going through the pipe that's going down the road, the bank road, and then down 116, and then dumping into the not wetland, but stormwater area. Is that coming straight from the holding tanks, or is that being held on site in some sort of stormwater pond and draining from that?
I got it, yeah. So we can use that one, that's fine. 'Cause it shows it. So essentially, if you look at the existing site with no building on it today, pretty much all the stormwater that comes off this site travels to the north and gets collected in this existing swale between the Hannaford property and the Dark Star properties. And then it flows down the swale and goes through a culvert underneath the road, and then basically flows down through another swale and goes to Patrick Brook. All right, so pretty much 100% of the water that comes off our site travels Dark Star. Now, way back when we started, we had all the testimony, we had all the pictures, we had all the issues about all the flooding problems that Dark Star had. So one of our goals and feedback we got from the board was to see what we could do to alleviate Dark Star, at least not make it worse. All right. So what we decided to do, instead of discharging our stormwater from our site into the swale and through the culvert, we elected to install a new culvert pipe down the road. So we have a new culvert pipe that's going down this road, then it runs down Commerce, and then it discharges here. And we agreed to construct this detention pond that had been approved previously by A&R that was never constructed. So what happens now in our site, we collect it, it goes into a water quality unit, then goes into what's called an isolator road and other treatment devices. So it goes through two treatment devices, then it goes into our underground storage. There's a storage system here, there's a storage system here. This releases a volume of water that's the same as the pre-development volume. A small portion of it gets diverted and goes down a new swale that's on our property, what's called a water quality volume. And we did that to meet the stormwater rules. And we do have a valid stormwater permit for our design. So a small portion goes down a new swale and eventually runs down along Dark Star. And we agreed at the town's request to lower and increase the size of the culvert underneath Commerce to further alleviate flooding concerns on the Dark Star property. The majority of our water in a storm goes down the culvert pipe. Goes down the culvert pipe, gets piped down Commerce, and then discharges into the detention pond that A&R had previously approved that we're going to construct as part of this project.
So that will be a pond. It's not just a swale. It will hold.
It will hold some water. There's a detention structure. It's not something that's per the current rules, either the 2007 or the 2017 rules. It was approved prior to that, but it will certainly help stormwater quality in Patrick Brook. And make no doubt that today there's very little detention that happens, and there's very little treatment. I mean, a good portion of the bank property comes off the back, the vet's property comes off the back, post office property comes off the back. All of Dark Star pretty much just drains off into the swales, goes through the culvert, through this swale, and direct shot right into Patrick Brook. No detention, very little treatment. That's today's condition. You know, we're proposing to improve not only the Hannaford site, but to improve the adjacent sites as part of our stormwater plan.
So another thing that I've been hearing is that under the 2017, that a grass line swale is not considered a water quality device at all. Is it true that it's, I mean, because if it's true that it's not a water quality device at all, that seems amazing to me, because it seems to me like it certainly in certain conditions would provide some water quality. I could see them downgrading it, but so am I misunderstanding that?
No, there's quite a few amazing things in the new rules, actually, and that's one of them. But you are correct that a grass swale is no longer considered a water quality device. But the new rules do allow for alternative practices. The old rules, you either met the rules and you couldn't do anything different. If it wasn't in the rules, you couldn't do it. And the new rules, however, they leave the door open for people to propose alternate means of stormwater. And I know that we have 2 ADS devices that weren't approved under the old rules, but we elected to install them anyways. It's a water quality device and then an isolator row. So we've had 2 water quality devices that we've always had that we got absolutely no credit for. They're manufactured by a company called ADS. I know that ADS is currently talking to ANR to get those as approved devices. So if we were to apply for a permit, which we have no intention on doing under the 2017 rules, it is possible that ANR could approve the 2 additional water quality devices we have as sufficient to meet the water quality standard.
Okay, so
I don't know that for sure. We wouldn't know unless we applied. And
so what we've heard so far from opposition is that they're not qualified, and that's a true statement. They are not
that's a true
qualified at this
statement,
time.
But the opposition also said that our current stormwater design wouldn't get a permit from the state the first time around, and it did. And they argued that in the environmental court and all the way through, and at least so far, ANR has pretty much agreed with our design and approved it.
Okay.
So they've been consistent with no matter what we've proposed, saying that it doesn't meet the stormwater rules. So I would expect nothing to change this time around.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Do you have any expert? You go ahead.
Would there be an opportunity to increase that retention pond further down to more match your retention tanks, for no better term?
Yes, this pond down here, we looked at a number of different designs. ANR came back and said that we have an approved design. That's what we want you to construct, and that's what we want you to model. So that's where we are there.
I'll just add to that there's the Commerce Park as a whole, as part of its original subdivision, includes a 30-foot wide easement in that area for stormwater. And we can't go beyond that. There's a limit to that. So we've got to stay within that 30-foot wide. So that puts some just physical restrictions on what can be done in that particular area.
So just to clarify, the current stormwater design is not designed to meet the 2017 rules, is that correct?
It was designed for the 2007 rules.
Okay.
2002, I believe.
2002, correct.
2002 rules.
Yep.
And we have, what I'm struggling with is that we have policy that we're trying to interpret that suggests that the newest stormwater permit has to be complied with. And we have a letter from you saying that it should meet it, although you're not going to go get that permit.
May meet it, I think.
May-
Well, I just heard the testimony.
May
meet
is
it.
correct.
And that is contingent on those devices being approved.
Correct.
Okay. This is where we're struggling, and we'll discuss internally.
We have an existing valid permit, and at this point, having been through 10 years of this, we have no intention of, applying for another permit that we don't believe we need. We believe with a valid state permit, we're good to go as far as that's concerned.
There is opportunity to expand the isolator rows if need be. Is that correct?
We've been told by ANR that even the slightest deviation will require us to amend our permit. And again, we've got a valid permit If we weren't under constant appeal from opposition, we might consider such a thing. But we know that they will fight us every step of the way, so frankly, no, we're not going to do that.
All right. But just basically, hypothetically, it would be able, because in my review, I noticed that a portion of the stone is below the level of the invert and doesn't drain. And would you say it would be possible, hypothetically, to make up that extra volume by extending the isolator rows?
So, but you're talking about a thing that they're not going to apply for, not going to do,
Okay, then I will, never mind.
So,
Sorry.
Although I think it's worth reminding people that the regulations require us to meet a 10-year standard, and it's been we designed it to a 25-year standard. So there's already substantial excess volume in that. It is over-designed with respect to what the requirements are under the A&R rules, whether you're looking at 2002 or 2017.
And was the soil testing, was that just done recently, and that's what was in the new letter? The soils that have classified it as D, and we have the opponents challenging that determination? Was that a new soil test?
No.
Okay, that was from the original.
Years ago.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Do you have any expert? That's awesome.
I'm raising my hand.
Good evening again. So, if I may, my name is Theresa Giroux Watershed. I've been before the board before on this stormwater a few times. And so I just listened to the applicant's testimony, and I just want to address a few points, a few clarifications. I guess just to start, first of all, I don't believe we ever maintained that the applicant would not get a permit. It was always our position that they shouldn't get a permit by the agency, and that's still my position. I still don't believe that the project complies with the 2002 rules, let alone the 2017 rules. And I think we just have to be really clear about the soil mapping on the site. The whole northerly portion of the site is actually mapped as C. It's not C/D, it's just straight C. And there's no waiver in the rules for providing recharge for C soils. The other soils are not D, they are a letter /D. And that's actually an important distinction. I heard something by the applicant suggesting that the second letter is the soil in the native condition. I've never heard anything like that. I could actually provide the board with the NRCS, the Soil Conservation Service manual, which describes the hydrologic soil groups. But essentially what that second letter represents is the condition of the soil during times of higher groundwater. So it could be a very sandy soil, which during times where groundwater is coming up, there could be reduced amount of infiltration. You know, maybe no infiltration when that water actually reaches the surface. But it's not, it doesn't represent the native condition of the soil. So actually the soils, if you look at the soil borings as I did, which were done out here, a lot of the soils are actually either sand or silty sand, not clay. There's certainly deposits of clay, but on the surface, there's actually good infiltration. If you look at the map here, I know it's a little hard to see, but everywhere there's green on the parcel is an upland area. That means it's not wetland. The wetland areas are the areas that you can see shaded in blue with the diagonal lines. The rest of the site is actually upland. So I see no reason why there isn't infiltration capacity on the soil, on the land surface right now. And so because of that, by paving over the entire site, you're losing that infiltration capacity that needs to be made up somehow with infiltration type features. And that's the whole purpose for this groundwater recharge standard, which is one of the standards in the manual, which there's no structure being proposed which is going to be able to meet that standard. I work, they talked about ADS with this water quality unit. I work with ADS all the time. It's a good product. We work with them quite a bit. I know a lot of these proprietary manufacturers are talking with the agency. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be approved. I think I said in my letter, the ADS isolator row, it's a pre-treatment type feature. Same with the tank, which is basically just a settling chamber for stormwater solids, sediment, which is entrained in the stormwater. It's not a filter, which is really going to be getting at the more harmful pollutants like the dissolved phosphorus, which would pass right through that type of a system. And that's the whole reason why the agency now has requirements for not just allowing a grass swale, but actually requiring, if you're going to do something like a swale, actually having a 2-foot filter bed underneath the swale, which is designed to take the water and filter it through that media before it's actually discharged out, because the swale just doesn't provide the performance that originally people thought it would a number of years ago. So I think those were the comments just to respond to the applicant tonight. I guess just one other, or a couple other points. I didn't see anything in the applicant's response addressing the downstream flooding issue, which I think is one of the biggest issues on the site related to stormwater. The 10-year peak discharge being increased and the deficient culvert downstream, and no response in the applicant's letter to that particular standard. And then I think finally was the board's request for how the project complies with low impact development standards, which are in the town's ordinance, and really to provide to be defined as a low impact development system. The site really does need to reduce the overall volume of stormwater. So we're not talking the peak discharge necessarily, but the overall amount of runoff being generated. So whenever you're paving over a site like this, you're generating a lot more runoff. So there has to be a way to mitigate that, and the only way to mitigate that is to either put it back in the ground or retain it and reuse it on site, or trap it in something which, like a bioretention feature, which has plants which can absorb and then transpirate that water out. So without those types of features, there's no way to control the volume on the site. So you'll have increase in stormwater volume, and that's what we're seeing with this project. So I don't feel like reading the town's ordinance that the site actually complies with that standard. So that's all I have.
Thank you.
I had a quick question that I believe we've heard, and I can be corrected, but that the applicant and you agree that off-site at the point of Patrick Brook, there is going to be that net increase in peak discharge flow. And is that only during the 10-year? Is that the period that it was modeled, or is it the 25-year?
I don't recall specifically the 25, but certainly the 100-year storm, there'll be an increase as well. I mean, I would imagine if there's an increase in the 10-year, there will also be an increase in the 25 and the 50, everything above the 10.
So the 10-year is what the period that everybody's agreed on, that's where there will be an increase at the Patrick Brook entrance.
That's what I'm seeing in the, based on the applicant's own modeling, it shows that there will be an increase at that, where the water flow actually reaches the brook during the 10-year storm.
And the culvert that you mentioned, was that the 116 culvert?
Yeah, the 116 culvert was studied by Malone McBroom, and they actually did their own hydrology model of the whole watershed and determined that the culvert is currently deficient. I recall it's not suitable to pass the 50-year storm, so talking the culvert in context of the 100-year storm, certainly adding a 100-year peak discharge will increase that deficiency.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Anybody from the public? We got one other thing we're going to talk about, and then we'll open it up for general questions.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I think the next question is about the official map. Does any of the board members have any questions for the applicant on the official map?
Ted has one, yeah. You said?
Anybody from the public? We have,
Advisory board.
Jeff French, I'm with the Planning Commission. So we submitted a memo, I think it was given to you guys last meeting, but we didn't have anybody to come talk to it. So I was hoping tonight I could just really quickly kind of give you the background and how the Planning Commission came to this memo that we wanted to get in front of you. So really quick background. As you know, this has been going on for some time. The Planning Commission has changed over the years, but there was feedback both in 2010 and 2012 in regards to the official map and how this project complies with that. Both times previously, the Planning Commission recommended finding this plan in conflict with the official map for various reasons. And I know, since that time, when the Planning Commission sent that last memo, right, we went through the whole approval and respectful disagreement, and I think you were looking for more specificity in some of the requirements. So we took a look at it, and we're a new Planning Commission, and we looked at the official map and looked at this plan again and where it all comes in. And some of the issues that we had were one, just some background as to why the requirement is written the way it is. It's not super specific in terms of, this will be only for a farmer's market and it will only be 20 by 20 in a certain location. And the reason we don't do that is we don't know what the developments are going to be on these places. We know that's an ideal location that we're looking for, but if we say farmer's market and something comes in that just completely conflicts with that, we want to give you a little bit of flexibility to say, well, okay, well, how about X or Y or Z? So that's why there isn't a lot of specificity to that level, because we feel it ties the hands and gives you the ability to work with the applicants on that. So when we look at this, everything we look at is in terms of our sort of guiding vision statement when it comes to the town plan, and our regulations and the official map are all around, especially here in the village, is around a walkable, livable, vibrant village core. That's everything we look at. That's pretty much the start that we look at things in that lens. So when we took a look at the proposed site plan, I don't know if we can put it up so I can point to it, just the picture of the plan itself. As you know, the proposed farmers market, or the accommodation for community use, was put on the site plan. It was sort of in the back of the building. I believe they got a subdivision or an extension. I can move wherever you want me.
Well, there's a pointer. I was going to say, if you're going to point to something on the map, you might want to.
So some of the things that we took a look at, using that lens of how we look at these things, some of the issues that we saw as our planning commission did, sure how to use this, is first let's just get a, okay, where are we? So right here is the proposed, how the applicant is going to fit the community need as the official map stipulates. Some of the issues that we saw with this particular design is, although it says it's 0.32 acres, the vast majority of that 0.32 is unusable because it's sloped. And it's, it's only a tiny portion of what you see here. So that was one concern that we had, is it's not really an accommodation for the community. It's just a smaller parcel put in the back. Also, we feel that the location in here is unsuitable. So in the view of that walkability, livability, this doesn't connect to anything. There's no, you have to come off a sidewalk, down a driveway, across a parking lot to get to it. There's no, it's not something that I can see people saying, I'm going to go out of my way to go there. through walking or livable, right? You're going to drive here, park, go, drive, leave. The other concern is the location is by the loading dock of the grocery store. So you've got trucks coming in and out. You usually have dumpsters in that location. You're in the back of the building. Here you've got Dark Star and their equipment. You've got the back of Aubuchon Plaza. You've got an auto yard and a scrap yard. So for us, we talked about that a lot, and just the location on the site itself just doesn't seem very accessible to the community, if you will. So it's that was one of our issues. Also, the other issue was around the easement that the applicant gave for this piece of property. And when we looked at it, it had a comment in there that if it's not used as a facility in 5 years as a farmer's market, we lose it. And as you know, currently, since this came through, we don't have a farmer's market in Hinesburg anymore. And our concern is if no farmer's market comes in, nobody uses that land. As we stated, it's not really accessible to anybody. It's just a community feature that we're going to lose out on, and we won't have at all. So those three things have this planning commission, again, asking you to find this in conflict with the official map. It just doesn't, that as a community feature just doesn't work. So we ask you as a board to look at it in the lens of, you know, livability, walkability, kind of the guiding vision of the village, and help determine what would be a good facility here. It can be whatever it is, right? It can be a farmer's market, it can be a park, it can be anything that we see deemed fit to help the community. But wherever it is, that location and size just isn't, we feel, is not enough to accommodate that. So that's why we decided how we did, and we voted 5-1, that you should find it in conflict. So I just wanted to give a background. So if you got any questions, I'll take them. Otherwise, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Hello, I'm Mary Beth Bowman. I want to get back to the very beginning of the session when Greg mentioned that the fact that Hannaford did not show up last time. My thought is that was such a disrespectful thing to do that the applicant did. And you wonder if that's the way they felt about, about the board and the community, what would happen if we needed something from them at another time? And that to me kind of spoke to who they are. They don't care. And they may have had an excuse, and I guess they did, but it doesn't speak well for them. Thank you.
Comments on the official map?
Johanna White, and as a former Planning Commission member back in 2010, the reason that we came up with, on the official map, with that particular piece of land was simply because several businesses had attempted to develop it. NRG being one of them. They had to go down 80 feet to reach land or surface that they could actually build upon, build a two-story building on. So they walked away. A couple others walked away for the reason that it didn't seem to be buildable. There was a wetland on it, and so as the Planning Commission, we looked at that and said, wow, here it is in the center of town, so to speak. It's on the canal. There's walkability, there's parking in all of the surrounding businesses where if you wanted to have a holiday celebration or a farmer's market, there would be parking that could happen. And this particular piece of land could become a focal point, a place where the town could meet in the center of the village. So when we put it on the official map, it was done with a great deal of consideration. Farmers market could be there, a skating rink could be there on the wetland in the wintertime. There were all kinds of things that came up. And I don't think that any of those things have changed in the minds of the people that originally decided to put that on the official map, and I do believe in it. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jeff Jabalt. I have no expertise on any of this. I'm expert in paying taxes in Hinesburg, which I've been doing for 20 years. And I was involved as a citizen in the process of developing the town plan, the town map. And there are three things that I remember distinctly: an amazing consensus. We wanted the town to retain its rural character. We thought that building, that lot, as this woman just said, was unbuildable, our mistake, but we thought it would be a suitable place to center community action, community activities, and would enhance the town and would be an open space. And we also felt that we did not want the big box stores. We even said as much. I think we wrote as much. We said 20,000 square feet. And an oversight, this plot of land was not given that restriction. If we, as this gentleman behind us that has represented Hannaford for so long, and one of his first meetings was, this is not a land of, the laws are not, this is a country of laws, not of people. I believe it's pretty close to a paraphrase of what he said. And I would argue that we are a place where laws are created by people and by intention and by good will. And I would ask you to step back from all of this unbelievably technical stuff and just look at the broader view of what the citizens, what the volunteer leaders like you, and I want to thank you for all the energy and effort that you put into this very important role in this town. And I thank you for that. But we had a broader view of what we wanted for Hinesburg. And I would also just add one other thing on a broad view. I was a journalist for a long, long time. I can't tell you how many retail developments I had to cover and explore and investigate. There was not a single retail development that I ever saw in which the retail developer did not know exactly how much money they were going to make. And they were able to determine that money through math by determining square foot sales, which is why I think that they've stuck to 36,000. And also they know exactly how many people and how many trips it takes to generate the income that they need to make a profit. I've not been at all the hearings, for sure. I hope someone has asked them for their marketing and numerical information, because I think that would give you a lot more precision on the traffic, which again, they know exactly how many cars are going to come in there. And I think, again, if you take the broad view and just say for a moment, we have a pretty unpleasant traffic situation. It's perplexed us for 8 or 9 years. I haven't seen it get any better. And the gentleman was quite right. I don't come into town between 3:30 and 6:30. Forget it. I'm not coming. And you can't tell me, as these guys are trying to tell us, that everything's going to be better because Hannaford is coming to town. Traffic will be better. We'll have a better store. We'll have better runoff from the water, better containment. I just don't buy it. And I would just ask you to look at the overview. Don't get lost in the weeds. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else?
For all of you, would you like proposed a draft decision from the parties, or would you rather not? Because if you'd like it, I can get it to you in 10 days or 2 weeks.
I would say no.
Okay.
Just speaking for myself.
All right. Are the board members ready to close this?
Are we going to leave it open in case we have questions
I don't know.
that
It's a
can be
question for
answered?
everybody.
I think we ought to close it sooner rather than later. I vote tonight.
What is consensus?
What if in deliberation we come up with a question and it's closed?
We've heard lots of testimony, so.
Okay. Okay, then I'm fine.
Yeah, I guess.
All right. See if I can get this right here.
We'll just open it again if we have to have a discussion, I guess. I mean, we've done this before. I don't see a reason to rush it. I just assume we continue it to, 2 weeks or 4 weeks, have a chance to deliberate on it. If we have anything else we need filled in, we can request staff get the information, and then the next meeting we could immediately close it and.
Well, except whenever you do that, you really have to kind of publish information and allow people to kind of offer their opinion of the information you just got, and it's like it gets to.
It's provided before the meeting, every meeting.
Yeah, but we only have 45 days, right?
Only if we close it, yes.
Yeah.
If we close it. If we keep it open.
So that's my take. I mean, I know everybody's tired, and once
October 19th is 45 days from now. Just if you want a perspective. And I guess one question you could ask yourself now is, are you seeing such a different amount of information coming to you that you think you're going to see something different if you did wait longer?
Having been through this once, I do not have that feeling. Sometimes I do,
It's
but
a
I don't
question,
feel
yeah.
that in this application.
I guess I can't think of anything else to ask at the moment. I mean, my concern is when we discuss it as a board, more questions might come up. But, I'm exhausted at this point.
Reopen it based on that.
You could also continue this to October 2nd and perhaps have a deliberation at the meeting before that, in between. Although there is a number of things on the September 18th hearing date, there probably would be some time for a deliberation.
We can't deliberate in private without closing the hearing.
You could actually deliberate without closing the hearing if you want to. You could deliberate in closed session to decide whether you feel it's complete or not.
I thought we had decided a number of times ago that we couldn't do that.
Well, it's not typical, but you already did on this application. So you remember what it was opened in April, and you had a deliberation about which set of regulations would be used. There were questions on procedure, and you had a closed deliberation with the town council to better, think through those questions and provide some guidance to applicants. I think that if you read the open meeting law, you have wide discretion as a quasi-judicial body to exclude the public from your deliberations just like a jury would. As far as your rules of procedure that govern your operation that you yourself, put together, it is more typical to take all the evidence, close, and then enter into deliberations. But there's nothing preventing you from doing it that alternate way. The only thing I'll point out two things. You've been at this since April. There have been many, many opportunities to ask questions, receive information, and you have done that. So that would maybe speak to closing. However, in the first go-around with Hannaford, you had to reopen the hearing, and we had to rewarn it because questions came up about the easement in particular for the farmers market element. So you've had experience with having to rewarn and reopen and all of that. So I could argue it both ways.
I argued it one way, I'll argue it now the other way, kind of. You could just simply also say that you're all a bit tired right now, you think there's something more, and you want to continue this and have a deliberative session to try to figure out where you are.
If I could chime in for just 1 minute, I'm concerned that a lawyer might successfully argue that the 45 days starts now as a matter of practicality. I've seen that argument made before, even when a DRA said, we're keeping this open because we're not sure what we want to do. And then lawyers have argued that the 45 days starts then, whether you want it to or not. So you might want to check with your lawyer.
My reading of the Supreme Court decisions on the 45-day rule have imbued it with a great deal of flexibility and common sense.
I'm just saying, check with your lawyer about this. That's all.
Yeah,
that's not a concern to
kind of
me.
the opposite too, yeah.
If I may, it is Hannaford's preference that you close the hearing tonight. You know, we think we've provided ample amount of evidence. We've tried to be very responsive to the questions that have come up. I don't think there's anything more we, frankly, could provide to you at this point. So it would be our preference, although we understand the risk that you may have questions that you don't feel you have the answer to. Nonetheless, it would be our preference that you close the hearing tonight.
And staff-wise, we'll provide you whatever service you want.
Well, if
willing to
we
try
were
to
to
close it.
kick this around amongst ourselves at the next meeting, would we have time to do it at the next meeting? Just to kind of get a sense
Yes.
of where
I mean,
heads stood?
you have three hearings, but they shouldn't be too extreme.
And can we
Well,
ask
then
for
if
counsel?
we feel comfortable that we've done this before, then I would say let's just kick it down the road to the next meeting and let us then decide.
You talking about the next meeting, or you want to have that as an open meeting, or do you
No,
want to
we
schedule a
deliberate
deliberative
amongst
section,
ourselves at the next meeting
and then the
as to whether we
following meeting have
close.
an open meeting to decide if there's to hear any additional testimony or anything else that you want to do? Oh. Then I'm not sure.
Greg, you're suggesting that instead of closing, leave the meeting open, but at the next meeting, decide whether or not to close.
Amongst ourselves, yes.
Right.
Have kind of an informal caucus. Yeah. Get a sense of where.
Do we have a sense now? I mean, I'm inclined to close, given what we know.
I think it's to the applicant's benefit to sometimes have the ability to respond to any kind of clarification issues, but if the applicant is asking to close, I mean, I would want to leave it open for you guys to be able to answer our questions, to clarify. And if they're the people that want to close, then I say we close.
All right. You making a motion?
But I like the idea that, can we have counsel in a deliberative session next time?
You definitely will have counsel. I'm not sure that it makes sense to do it at your next meeting. Mitch and I talked about it today and worked through various scenarios. My preference is that since you probably don't have the horsepower to talk about it tonight, that you need to talk about it on the 18th, and that we can bring counsel in on October 2nd to review draft decision language that we will write in advance of the October 2nd meeting. And October 19th would be the deadline, so you have 3 meetings in which to nail this, and you could have a special, deliberation if those 3 meetings weren't sufficient.
And from the 2nd to the 19th, is ample time for you guys to write whatever the decision ends up being?
Yeah, my hope is that the feedback and the discussion that you guys will have at your next meeting on the 18th will provide fodder for us to draft a first take at a decision, have the attorney review it, and then you'll get a chance to look at it on October 2nd, and then there'll be one more meeting on October 16th to tidy it up.
Okay.
Could you tell us what's on the agenda next
I
meeting?
feel like we need
Share your thoughts.
some time.
I'll just say very, very simply, there is a sketch plan, there is a minor subdivision amendment, and, how can I forget, a final subdivision hearing that you've had a chance to see and probably wouldn't have many issues.
Okay.
3 hearings.
Okay, but
We typically schedule a half an hour each, but
Yeah.
one of those isn't going to take that because it's a minor revision.
okay,
One of
so
those should be very
So we
quick.
should have some time.
Yeah, you should have
Yes.
at least a half an hour and still be able to get out by 9:30.
Could we start that meeting a half hour earlier? And call it. and
Staff
ca-
is
and-
always happy to be
in-
here, start
instead of-
earlier, but that's
instead of
really up
having-
to you.
Instead of having a deliberative, an extra meeting, just try to make that one a little bit, shift it a little bit.
So you want to make the 18th a
I-
little earlier, or?
That's what she's suggesting, yeah. You should discuss that amongst
Yeah.
yourselves. We're happy to facilitate.
I'm fine with it.
Just that one, just to give us more,
So not the public portion, but just, we could do the deliberation in the first half hour and
Oh.
then start the public meeting at the same time?
we could do that too.
I don't
but-
think it matters to the applicants and the
Okay.
public as long as we advertise it
Warn it
properly.
enough, yeah.
I think you should do the public part of the meeting first. And
Yeah.
then
Just give us a little, so we're not 9 o'clock before we're.
If you're all in agreement of that, we'll notice it accordingly. I just want to check with Lenore, who does our noticing, to make sure we haven't already told people for that hearing that it's at 7:30, and I think we have. So we may need to do a little bit of what Dick's talking about, but we can make that happen.
Otherwise,
we can
I
work with
just don't,
Dennis on
I
that.
don't think we'll have enough time, and then we'll need a separate meeting.
Easily switch to perhaps first and be the 7 o'clock one, and then we could work with the other ones.
But are you all available at 7 o'clock on the 18th of September versus 7:30? John, you're shaking your head.
I'm out.
He's out.
Oh, you're not at that meeting at all?
I'm at it.
But the rest of you are
Who
available?
we're planning on coming anyway can come early.
Can't do it.
I don't have
You
my
wouldn't mind
calendar,
that.
but I expect I could be there.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so we'll do 7 and make it work.
My comments
Yeah.
earlier.
Okay, am I making a motion?
Yep, to close?
I'm making a motion to close the hearing, the Hannaford hearing, and
We're talking about both the
revision
the
of
subdivision
Commerce-
revision and the site plan.
revision of Commerce Park subdivision and site plan review. And take it up in deliberative session next, right? Meeting.
Yep. I'll second that.
Any more discussion?
No, this is, I don't think, no, I think they've done their testimony. The procedural is with the board, what the board wants to do at this point.
I heard Mr. Erb ask something. I respect Mr. Erb greatly, so I figured I'd... No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Is that,
Thank you all.
is that a unanimous?
That was.
I believe that was unanimous.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
So are we adjourned, or is there any other business?
There's some other
We have
business.
another
There is
application to approve the church.
one more draft decision.
Yeah, we only have 4 on that, don't we?
Good talk.
I think so, yeah, so that's, has to be the right.
Do we have 4?
So next is decision deliberation?
Dick, you and me, Sarah, and...
Yeah, and actually, the 4 people who were there,
They won't let us advance maternal leave.
Do you have news and announcements that I need to state?
okay, I'll just mention if you want specific, do you want? Yeah, can we ask people to quiet down, please?
Could the conversations go on outside, please?
We still have more business to do, so.
Is it just...
I'll just say, if you want me to tell you the specifics of the hearings, we have Andy Stolberg coming back to revise his subdivision revision. He wants to get rid of the requirement for landscaping. It was an issue when you had the Habers who actually owned the property. Now that his mother actually owns the property, they'd like to remove that condition. So you have that as one hearing. You have a sketch plan for a 2-lot subdivision on the corner of Mechanicsville Road and Mulberry, is it Mulberry Lane? It's a sketch plan on that. They want to put a,
Subdividing your front yard?
Yes.
it's actually,
Make room for the ice rink.
Two dollhouses?
Yes.
it's actually the property right across the street that, and it'll be an access from Mulberry Lane. And the other one is the one I know that we can definitely switch to 7 o'clock, is the Place final subdivision on Place Road West. So those are the three that remain. As far as draft decisions, I mean, obviously outside of the lining one that would be next, you've taken care of the draft decisions, so you wouldn't have that as part of it. You will have 2 extension requests that just recently came in. So that's not, it should not be a very long meeting. I mean, interestingly enough, I think the longest of those may be the final subdivision approval, although I will say that the 2-lot sketch plan, there has been some neighbors who have raised some concerns. So there may be some length to that, but you should probably have time in order to do deliberation on Hannaford. And we'll see if we can get you something preliminary, if we can.
Can we push can we push the extensions to the next meeting? I know it's like 4 seconds, but still, like, it requires some thought or not these 2?
I'm not sure. I'd have to take a look at the timing. I mean, one of them is...
If you don't see that
yeah.
there's been due diligence in that it's a repeated one, yeah,
We'll
yes.
check, yeah. Yeah, and just simply the last thing is, there's a draft decision for the United Church.
Yeah, just make sure we have a quorum, because we only had 4, I think.
You only had 4, but the 4 were Ted... No, wait. Who was the 4?
John, Ted, John, me, Dick, and Sarah, right?
Yeah, so actually, you 4 were actually here.
Yeah, so
You're
there
here.
was a quorum who heard it, and a quorum who...
As long as we're unanimous, we're good.
As long as we're unanimous, yeah. I had no issues.
I was just reading through it again real quick. Pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Let's see.
So, and the one that they're putting, that's potentially going to light up the path, that would go off at 10?
I believe that was the...
I don't remember that being part of the application, but that sounds good to me. I didn't remember it had a
You're
time.
talking about the spotlight that's on
Yeah.
the south? Yeah, they talked about it being both a motion sensor and being turned off right at 10.
Right on this corner.
Right.
Yes.
That's the one I was most
Yeah, we talked
concerned
about their
about.
dwindling church coffers.
Right. Okay, so 10 o'clock. I knew it was going to be motion sensor, but I didn't know
think
it
that was
was.
in there, if I'm not mistaken. We did
Yeah, I
put it-
don't remember that part, but that's good. 10's good. Because then it would have to be on a timer. I'm not sure that that was part of that.
The minutes only talked about motion sensor.
Really, I'm very certain that we didn't talk about a time.
So Sarah's point is the decision says it shall be off at 10 PM even if somebody walks in front of it at 11.
Right, and that's
You're
was,
saying the applicant didn't propose that.
I thought they did.
no. I mean,
Well,
I like it, but I'm not sure that that's a function of that light, that can happen.
Would you want to take that off the decision? We can do that.
They won't work.
Yeah, I'm
I
not,
don't believe they'll work. If you shut it off, it gets it all screwed up.
The timer would override the motion.
Right.
Yeah.
But then I don't know if the motion works after that. But I don't know.
yeah, that was not part, because I was concerned. I don't think that was part of the proposal.
so actually,
And a timer, yes.
But if you don't want an indecision, you come out.
What was it, finding it back 5?
Doesn't seem like there's a downside, it was just a motion light.
Yeah, I think it's fine. If you want to not have, I mean, I do, you can take out the 10. Is everyone okay with that? Because I don't think,
so that's the last bullet of finding effect 4? That's the light we're talking about.
Be turned off at 10 PM and come off.
Yeah.
So you're saying at 10:01, you don't care if they're safe?
No, it says you can still have the motion sensor.
Yeah, I'm saying.
Right, no, if you
yeah.
put a timer on it.
Maybe they should just mount a game camera and they can take pictures of people walking past there as the light flashes and scares them.
We can get a red light camera if you really want one, Dick.
Okay.
Move
We're
to
getting,
approve
we're
as
getting
amended.
crazy. Yep.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Well, okay.
Move to adjourn.
Okay. We're out of here.
So moved.
Thank you.
Thank you.